audience. We're glad to be here today. Just want a quick run through kind of how we do our town halls. We normally start out with the congressman giving you an update on what's going on in Congress and what he's been working on. After that, we'll do questions. If you filled out a card, they should go in a bucket, and I will randomly draw them out of the bucket. If you did not get a card, raise your hand, and my staff will get you one to fill out. When I call your name, you can ask your question, and then the congressman will answer it for you. Just a reminder to not clap or talk over everyone so everyone can hear the questions and hear the responses. So with that, let's stand and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks all. Here's Congressman Grothman.
Okay, thank you for being here. I want to point out in the audience who may call on them if you have any issues related. We have in the obstructed view seats, we have a couple state legislators, Devin Lemieux and Terry Kotzma, who are here today. So there they are. I'm glad to be in this room. Gary Fighter's here. Maybe Gary remembers. I think he was covering me. I used to do office hours here all the time when I was in the State Assembly 20 years ago. So, or at least I'd show up here all the time for village board meetings. Remember that? And I haven't been in this building for quite a while, so it's kind of cool to be in a building or a room I haven't been in for a while. It seems like years ago when I was here, it was a bigger room. But it can't be the same room. Okay, maybe it was more intimidating when I was younger or something. I thought, wow, what a big room. Okay. Like Rachel said, I want to go over a little bit what's going on in Washington, maybe give you a different sort of view than you get from the newspapers, and then we'll open it up for questions and see if I can go through things. I think the thing that has been biggest in the paper lately is the omnibus bill that passed last week. I voted against that bill because, quite frankly, I just think it was too irresponsible on the spending side. You're all familiar with it. An omnibus bill in Washington would be the equivalent of a state budget in Madison. That bill contained all of what we call the discretionary spending for the year that began last October 1st. So we're already about 6 months into that year, which is kind of unusual, isn't it? You figure, but until this point, we've passed a variety of continuing resolutions, basically spending the same amount we did in the prior year. And we finally wrapped it up here. We also put they also, like a state budget, are able to put any policy items in the bill that they wanted. So it's not restricted to just government spending. It has other things in it as well. Like I said, until this point, they're spending the exact same amount as last year. By the time they were done, there were significant increases in both military and non-military spending. I thought they were both higher than they had to be. Together with things spent largely on the hurricane, the total amount of what we call discretionary spending this year will be up about 18%. And if you consider that we're $21 trillion in debt, it's just unacceptable. As far as the military spending is concerned, President Trump had originally proposed a 5.5% increase. I am on the budget committee, and we increased that amount to about 8%, which I thought was really more than enough. But since then, to a large extent, at the request of a united core of our members of the Armed Services Committee, they eventually went up 10.5% of military spending compared to last year. And, well, if you talk to anybody in the military, they will tell you that there are problems, that we have, planes that are not flying, that we have a shortage of ships in the Navy. I still think that's a lot to flip around that quickly. And to me, 8.5% or so would have been fine. Given political reality in Washington, the omnibus bill will be bipartisan. And people say, why don't we do more bipartisan in Washington? Almost all we do in Washington is bipartisan. Any spending bill is. So, as a practical matter, you had to have all 4 leaders in Washington signing off. Paul Ryan had to sign off, Nancy Pelosi had to sign off, Chuck Schumer had to sign off, and Mitch McConnell had to sign off. It was put together, I think, a little bit last minute-y. As you read the paper, it was over 2,000 pages. We did not get a copy of it until within 24 hours of the time we voted on it. And of course, when you hear 2,300 pages, that's not pages that the average person can even read. That's legalese, where they'll say, you know, make a reference to section 487, parent H, parent 3, parent something or other. So you really don't even know what you're getting there. We were briefed and received some bullet points that our leadership provided to us, but anybody who knew all who was in that bill was just not being honest. So in addition to the fact that it was very high spending, you had a situation that you really didn't know what was in it. I was in the state legislature for quite a while, and I think as Terry and Devin would say, they would not stand for voting in a bill in the state legislature, would you? If you all of a sudden you were given a bill like that and not even a summary in layman's terms to know what you were voting on. So I voted against it for that reason, and I realize I sometimes have a history of compromising, you know, and I did talk to Democrat leadership, talked to Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer about the bill, and I think they would have been satisfied rather than going 10.5% on military and 9.5% on non-military. They would have been satisfied with 2% less on both those figures, which would have been more, I think, a little bit more responsible. But that's the situation that we had there. That's what we had to deal with, and it passed. It's the law now. I did call President Trump's office and ask him to veto the bill, and I felt we could have come back in a couple of weeks with something better. They were also up against the wall because the government would have shut down if we did not pass something by Friday night. And it just seemed to me that, you know, we could have come back on Monday, did a continuing resolution, and really not disrupted the government and had a little less spending. So I was disappointed in the omnibus, but President Trump tells us he's not going to sign something like that again. I am on the budget committee, so we're already going to start working on the budget. It'll begin on October 1st, and I look forward to not getting this sort of increase again. I think next year, because presumably we won't have such bad hurricanes, that by itself should hold down government spending a little bit, and hopefully there were such large increases in there for so many programs, we can hold down the rest of the budget to be here even as well. So that's what's going on with the omnibus bill. Next thing, in my last round of office hours, I talked about the tax bill, but I'll talk about it again since I think it was kind of the highlight of this session. There is, as a practical matter, well, there's another exception, but under general circumstances, you only get one chance a year to pass a bill with 51 votes in the U.S. Senate. Otherwise, it requires 60 votes, which makes things a lot more difficult. But through a process called reconciliation, we are able to deal with either mandatory spending, taxes, or debt, and got a bill passed with 51 votes in the Senate. We had a leftover opportunity to do that with Obamacare. It failed. You recall that failed. That would have been the omnibus. That would have been the reconciliation vote that we took in July of 2017. That was left over from 2016. The one chance to pass something with 51 votes in the Senate for 2017 was the tax bill. I do not know whether the Senate is going to do anything in 2018 on that or not. But in any event, we were able to largely on party line pass a tax bill, and I think will be overall good for the economy. The primary goal of the tax bill, I think, was to improve the business climate. Prior to the tax bill, our corporate rate was 35%, which was well above what most other industrialized nations have. And as we try to ramp up the American manufacturing, ramp up the American economy, it's hard to imagine being able to do that when we are so much higher than the other European nations and some of the Asian nations. So we cut the top corporate rate from 35 to 21%. I think if it wouldn't have been done, we would have seen a big drop in the stock market, been a real jolt to the economy, but instead it is something that I think is leading companies to bring jobs back to America. Also, under the old tax code, we had a situation in which if a company made money abroad, they would be taxed again. After they were taxed in Ireland or Germany or wherever, they'd be taxed again when they brought the money back to the United States. Obviously, we wanted to bring the money back to the United States to invest here, expand plant and equipment, that sort of thing. So we also changed that. And quite frankly, I think some of those things would have happened regardless of who won the election. The major thing that I weighed in on is to make sure manufacturing is treated fairly. First of all, I believe manufacturing is the source of a lot of wealth in society. Right? America is a wealthy society not because of all the law firms we have, it's because of our agriculture and manufacturing. So I did try to look out to manufacturing, make sure they were treated fairly. My other goal was to make sure the average guy was treated fairly. And to be honest, I felt the first Republican proposal that some Republicans ran on last session was tilted too much towards the investor class. They, for example, had special lower tax rates for people with interest income. I do not know why you tax somebody who's earning interest income on money they inherited at a lower rate than somebody who's working for the income. So I think I made a lot of progress there. Originally, some Republicans wanted to get rid of the medical deduction. I used to do taxes years ago, which I think gave me a little more standing and dealing with the other Republicans, and a little more knowledge. A lot of Republicans had felt we'll get rid of the medical deduction because it only affected a small minority of people. As someone who used to do taxes, I know it affects a small minority of people. Those people in the worst shape possible. So you don't want to take it away from them. But I think of the medical reduction, I think filling out those returns. You're dealing with people in nursing homes. Today you're dealing with people with big deductibles who are going through a 401k, paying for medical expenses, or people with $20,000 a year in medical insurance premiums. And I felt they had an impact there because of my past knowledge. Sorry, I got to speak up.
And, well, it stopped.
Can everybody hear in the background?
It's just when the machine was running.
Oh, okay. So I think I had an impact in bringing back the medical deduction because of my past experience, so I thought that was a good thing. And I also thought I did a good job of making sure that in the final package, it is hard for me to imagine a situation of somebody making under $100,000 a year, and $100,000 is a lot of money, that won't be receiving an income tax cut, which is a good thing. I talked to a employer right after it was passed. His wife did bookkeeping for a business with about 30 to 40 employees, and they found the average employee there had their withholding go down about 12%, which I thought was a significant drop, good for the economy overall. So by the time I was done, I was satisfied with the tax bill and felt we moved the ball in the right direction as far as I was concerned. The few people that had their taxes go up were usually people in high tax states with higher income, and that's because we put restrictions on the amount of mortgage interest you can take. There are very few people, I assume, in this room with over $750,000 of mortgage over $750,000. But I think in places like California, New York, and New Jersey, that's not that unusual. And that's why you saw the Republicans who voted against the bill, at least in the House of Representatives, were largely people from those states, high tax states with people with a lot of wealth. So that was good. As far as other things that are going on, school safety is in the news. The things I'm going to be focusing on from an educational perspective are twofold. There's one bill that I introduced last week that will allow more flexibility for local school districts to direct federal funds towards school safety. Okay, it's unfortunate it's come to this, but be it people protecting the schools or more metal detectors, that sort of thing, it is something that I think, given society today, different than the society I grew up in, is something where it has to be something that school boards are going to look at a little bit more than they have in the past, and the ability to use federal funds for that is, I think, an important thing. The other thing I'm going to look at that I don't think was overly publicized is down in Broward County, they had a policy where they were trying not to have young people get a criminal record. And as a matter of fact, it was the sheriff or DA, somebody down there bragged, or at least boasted a little bit, not long before this shooting, that the number of criminal charges on young people down there had dropped by about 75%, 70%, something like that. And it wasn't because the amount of crime had dropped, it was because they just weren't charging people. This Cruz guy who did the killing had over 30 contacts with police. And some of those things were, I believe, felonies. The guy maybe should have been in jail or in prison. He certainly should have had a record on which it would have been illegal for him to carry guns. But there is a growing segment of society that says that we are going to deal with the increased criminal behavior of youth just by not charging with crimes. And this Broward County is one of the first counties to go down this path. Eventually, the past administration issued guidances encouraging school districts to adapt a policy of not charging young people with crimes. And of course, the reason we charge young people with crimes is not to be mean to the young people. We want to discourage them from committing crimes in the first place. We want to put them in a system in which we do something with them, we incarcerate them or give them help or whatever. So I also have a bill forbidding in the future the Secretary of Education from putting guidances out like that. First of all, it's none of the federal government's business to muck around in Random Lake and say, you know, we're going to force you or encourage you not to charge young people with crimes. And secondly, on the face, it's foolish. I mean, when I went to school, I don't think anybody I went to school had 30 contacts with the police. But if they did have 30 contacts, something would have happened to them. If they had done things that wrong, they would have wound up at Lincoln Hills, Lincoln Hills was around there back then or something. And I think, well, there are always, when you have one of these shootings, there's a lot of what if, what if, what if. I think there's no doubt in my mind that they would have not adopted such a silly policy down there in Broward County. This guy would have been in the system in some fashion, and the shooting wouldn't have taken place. I think that the first of my bills has a good chance of becoming law. The second one's going to be a little tougher go, but we're going to try on both. The other thing I'm going to touch on is also on the Education Committee, we are working on a higher education bill. We are focusing on student loan debt and also focusing on making sure kids are trained for jobs. Right now in today's economy, there is a lot of demand for people with skills. Okay, whether you're talking to factories, whether you're talking to truck driving, whether you're talking to construction, people cannot find people to work. And on the other hand, we have young people going to school, huge amounts of debt, and sometimes getting jobs paid $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 a year, which isn't enough to pay off that debt. We are therefore going to try to put some sort of sanction on educational institutions that wind up having kids graduate with student debt and they're not paying it off. And hopefully by doing that, we are going to encourage these educational institutions to direct kids into fields in which they will be able to get jobs. You could say it's the kid's own responsibility, but in my opinion, when you're 18, 19, 20 years old, sometimes you don't know enough about life. And it's up to the universities, who should know what's becoming of their graduates, to direct you more in the right places. So hopefully this bill can get through. Some people will not like doing that, but like I said, I think we've got to do something to sanction educational institutions of a high percentage of their graduates are taking out loans and not able to repay their loans. Finally, as part of a budget bill, not the omnibus bill, one of the reasons I voted for it is we are going to get that bill, is we are going to get more federal money involved in opiate abuse. We are going to put more money in there to have more inspections at our ports. We're going to see what we can do to track down some of this fentanyl that's coming in from China, which is wrong. We're going to send more money to local governments to do task forces on the drugs, because I know for all the people who are dying around here right now, it's a close call, but I think we can get years in which there are more people dying of drug abuse than homicides and car accidents put together. So it is something we have to look at a lot more. We're also going to spend more money on treatment. and hopefully this is a step in the right direction. One of the things I will push for as we address this opiate problem is more paying for treatment that works. There's a lot of treatment out there, sometimes it doesn't work. You hear about people going through treatment several times. I think when we pay for treatment, because there is treatment out there that's ineffective, we ought to be paying for results and pay these institutions that people are drug-free, not just pay them across the board. So that's a little bit as far as what's going on. When I go back, because I think there was a general outrage at the excessive spending of the omnibus bill, I'm going to try to push the Trump administration more than ever to try to take up some sort of welfare reform. I think it's a lot easier to get welfare reform done if we do not have to get 60 votes in the Senate. I think Donald Trump, if he wants to get involved in this issue, in the past he said he's going to have to apply some public pressure to the Senate to take up some sort of welfare reform. I think welfare reform would include drug testing for welfare benefits. I think it would include time limits for welfare benefits. And I think it would include work requirements for welfare benefits. And hopefully, we can use our opportunity to pass one bill with 51 votes in the U.S. Senate to take up some sort of welfare. And hopefully Donald Trump, who signed that omnibus bill reluctantly, was publicly critical of it, will therefore feel he's got to come up with something on the welfare side, in part to save money because we're so in debt, but also in part because I think the current welfare bill discourages work and discourages forming of families, both of which are problems that lead to the moral decline in America. So, that's what's going on. Did anybody put anything in the bucket?
Yes.
Great. Okay, what do we have?
Charlene Dobb? Do you have a question?
Yes.
The only question I have is, they removed the VA part out of the omnibus bill, and just that when you go back into session to look at addressing that, because it is critical, the components of that, like the caregiver. It's not fair that somebody that served in Iraq and got blown up, his caregiver gets respite and a stipend from the federal government, and can, deal through the VA and get services through the VA. And somebody whose veteran was served in Vietnam or served in Korea, in the exact same circumstances, their caregiver is just told, screw you, figure it out yourself.
It kind of surprised me, given all the money they spend that omnibus bill, that they would take that provision out of there. But like I said, we're starting working on a new budget right away. That is something that is negotiated with what they call the cardinals, who are under the head of the Appropriations Committee. It took a while for us to see it was in that omnibus bill. Like I said, I didn't actually know that at the time I voted for it, because the vote was so quickly afterwards. But when we get back to Washington, that's something we'll look into right away. I will talk to the person who's the chairman of the subcommittee on veteran affairs and see what happened there.
I know they said that the reason it got pulled out was because that wasn't that there wasn't support for it, there was just no funding for it. And yet, when you look at those caregivers and those veterans post 9/11 that do get those caregiver benefits, it's actually costing less money than those older veterans because of nursing home care, the price, the cost.
You're saving money because you're keeping them out of a nursing home.
Right, and they're at home with family and loved ones, it's a better quality of life, and it's still saving money, so.
Right. And it is a better quality of life, and I know at that time in life, I think it's so much better to be at home. Right, I agree with you entirely, and it's a little surprising, of course they're going to say there's not enough money, but when you have a 9.5% increase in non-defense spending, how can you say there's not money?
Arlene Mueller?
Mike, on the VA too, I have a question on all the discussion about eliminating VA care and going private, and what does that really mean in terms of eventually going private?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to shut down the VA. I think when they talk about more private care, what they talk about is for people who are not near a VA facility.
Which we are.
Or if they, right, then you should have the option to go somewhere else. I'm in favor of that. I mean, obviously it's difficult for somebody in Random Lake necessarily to get to Milwaukee, right? And there are some VA facilities who aren't that good around the country. And that's something you have to take into account as well. It really bothers me when you hear about facilities like that, because really our veterans should be getting the best care, right? And if you're in a situation in which you have a VA facility that's not that good, of all people, we should be making sure that veterans get the best care, right?
Well, I've worked through the choice program, and my background is working through a lot of resources. That's a very difficult program to work through, and you know, it was passed, government made it sound like it was such a wonderful thing. It's just difficult to work through, to find providers, to get paperwork, you know, you're with a third party. Why did they ever go to a choice program? It just seems,
Well,
I still hear good things about it for any veterans that have to traverse it.
Right. I think there were some around the country, there's some facilities that weren't that good, and there's some veterans who live far from a VA facility. Okay.
Gary Fider? Cedar?
I'll let all the people
Okay.
ask the questions.
Okay.
Debbie Patel?
We'll see
Hi.
the toughest questions we'll ask.
I'm going to change my question because it sounds like there are veterans in the room or people that care for veterans. And this is an issue that's new to me, the concept of medical marijuana. And I understand that some veteran groups are pushing for the legalization of medical marijuana. And I think you've said in the past that you're not in favor of legalizing marijuana. I wanted to hear your views on medical marijuana. It's apparently effective for PTSD and other things.
There's a guy I'm going to talk to about it. I'm still learning about the issue. There's a guy, I think he's out of the country for a while, but he's going to come back and I'll do follow-up conversations with him. He had some, I am for, what do we call the, I forget the name of it.
Oh, CBD oil.
Yeah, CBD oil.
Okay, I'm going to write that down because that's new to me too. CBD oil?
Right.
Okay.
Which should be a little bit of a step in the right direction. And when he returns to the country, hopefully he'll give me a call and we'll see where we stand on medical marijuana otherwise.
Okay, thank you.
Dave Mash? Dave, I believe this is Dave. Lake Drive in Random Lake?
I'm sorry, my hearing's not too good.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm thinking about the tax breaks and what, for our grandchildren, when we're just going wild every year and that, what do they have?
Well, the purpose of the tax breaks, like I said, is largely to grow the economy, okay? When we are not competitive on corporate income tax rates, you're not going to get those big numbers in which income tax receipts, be it corporate or individual, grow, right? I don't care what program you look at. As you look at trying to balance the federal budget, they spend way too much money in this omnibus bill. But as you try to grow it, you've got to get back to the days in which you're getting 3 or 4 or 5% growth in the American economy. And you're not going to get that growth when your income tax rates are not competitive with the rest of the world. So the goal of the tax cuts is to work towards balancing the budget, right? And if we're sitting there at 35%, Ireland's sitting at whatever, 10 or 15% or whatever, big companies are not going to go. And we are not going to be able to get those booming increases in corporate income tax or individual tax receipts or Social Security tax receipts without a growing economy.
Gary McMullen?
Okay, my concern was school safety.
Right.
I've talked to 9 different teachers, 3 grade school, 3 middle, and 3 high school. None of them from the same school district, so it's really spread out. And everyone I asked the same question. They didn't even know I was going to ask it, but what do you think is the biggest concern? It's not gun control, it's mental illness. So each one of the teachers told me that, you know, right now, these kids develop these records, they go into a sealed record, nobody can look at it. But if you, like you mentioned earlier, somebody that's got 30 offenses, there's kids already that have 6 and 7, but nobody looks at it. When they turn 18, they do a background check, there's nothing there. That's not right. I mean, I realize for the kids' safety or whatever, but if they got a problem, and I also think if they have a problem at school, instead of just giving them 3 days off, they should be required to go and see a psychologist or something and come back and say, okay, I'm working on this to make it better. And bullying is the other thing. And most of the teachers say the bullying is what causes the problem. So the kids themselves could actually fix their own schools just by stopping the bullying.
Thank you for your comments. It's largely a state issue, I think, to the degree to which we deal with criminal records, the degree to which you have access to them when someone's an adult as opposed to someone as a child. I do hear that mental illness is a much bigger problem than it used to be. And why that is, I do not know. I think maybe the breakdown of the family has something to do with it. But I will agree with you, not only at the high school level, but at the college level, the number of people who feel they need treatment for mental illness is just way up compared to when I was a child. Don't you think that's true?
Oh, for sure. My wife works in the school system. And she said, you can almost predict which kid is going to act up a month from now because they're right on the edge and they get bullied a little bit, and that just pushes them over the edge. And you know, if you didn't have that, if you have like you said, a home environment that's nurturing, the same thing applies in the school system. If everybody looks out for everybody else, we wouldn't have these problems. But no, so many people like to just keep pushing and pushing, and then you have the problems.
Right. I agree.
Doug Ames.
I didn't submit a question.
Okay. Rich Bremer.
My question would be, in this new session, are Republicans going to repeal and replace Obamacare? Or is that just it?
As you know, or maybe don't know, I voted for two different plans, one's in the committee and one's on the floor, to come up with replacements for Obamacare. I do not believe that the Republicans in this session will use what they call their reconciliation instructions, where Republicans are able to pass them without Democratic help, to take up Obamacare again. And as the result, I think it would be impossible for the Republicans to do that by themselves. Anything that happens for the rest of the year is going to have to be done on a bipartisan basis. It depends whether the two parties are able to get along. I know that Patty Murray from the state of Washington, Lamar Alexander, Republican from Tennessee, are working on something or other, and we'll have to see what they come up with. But like I said, there's one shot a year to get something done with 51 votes. I met with a senator at length a couple weeks ago, and he felt pessimistically that the Senate might not do anything at all as far as the ability to do something with Republicans just acting alone in 2018. I think, by the way, I think that's completely irresponsible. I have said I want to take up something on welfare reform, which they could have done, but he felt the difficulty of getting 51 senators. Right now, the Republicans only have 51 senators. So the difficulty of getting, say, 50 senators plus the vice president to act on instructions to pass a bill with 51 votes would be very, very difficult. And you got to remember, John McCain right now is held back in Arizona too, which takes away another vote there. So I think anything that we do on replacing Obamacare is going to have to be bipartisan for the rest of 2018.
Robert Bulkey.
I've got just a question for the, in the welfare, all these food stamps. Why can't they have a picture on it? Because you hear these kids that are in drugs, they get food stamps or whatever, and they're just trading it. That it's the biggest waste of our money.
Yes, I think if you talk to anybody who works somewhere where they sell food, be it a grocery store or convenience store, they will give you tons of stories. And that is why I desperately wish we would use our opportunity to pass some of the 51 votes of this year to address the welfare situation. You are right. I was talking to, I don't know how this is even possible, I was talking to Gail the other day north of here at one of the convenience stores, and she talked about seeing people popping cards that they have that shows how much money they have left on the card. $700 or $800 on a card. What do you do with $700 on a food stamp card? I mean, it's just, it is a system so rife with fraud. And not just fraud, but like I said, like all those programs discouraging work, discouraging marriage. I agree with you entirely. You could also restrict what you can buy with food stamps, right? I mean, to me, there's a program called Women's Infants and Children for young kids or pregnant mothers. And you sometimes see you go to the grocery store and you see which ones you want. Maybe like the corn flakes or whatever. And I don't know why food stamps should not be that same way as well, where you can't buy everything with them. You're restricted to buy more nutritious food. You should not be able to buy Pepsi with food stamps, should you? Right? No. You could say no, no.
No, you shouldn't.
And that was our last question. But I have 4 people here who put their email on our form here. If you want to receive our emails, come and see me. I have to have you actually check the box if you want to receive the emails, and none of you did. So it's Charlene, Gary, and Doug, and Rich. Thank you.
Oh,
That's
you said
it.
there's one more?
No, that's it.
Oh, that's it? Okay, well, good. I got nervous. I was hoping for more, so I wouldn't have to deal with Gary's question. Gary, by the way, for those of you who came outside of Random Lake, how long have you owned the Random Lake Southern?
I've been the editor since May of 1975.
We should. Are you the longest serving editor of any newspaper in the state of Wisconsin?
I doubt it.
Cool. I wouldn't say I doubt it, 43 years. Gary does a tremendous job. And I've been dealing with him for the tail end of that career. I was going to say I've been with you all the way, but you were doing this for 18 years before I did this. Do you want to ask a question, or should we do an interview later?
Well, if you follow the national news, you're hearing, or I hear a lot, that there's this Democratic wave coming in the fall election. How do you sum up what you see coming?
Well, it's more of a political question. I think there are things that it cost purposes. It is true that over time, when a new president comes in, 2 years later, his party doesn't do well. It's also true that in general, Republicans do a little better in an off year than a presidential year. And it's also true that I think if the economy does well, the party in power does better. So right now, the economy is doing well, it's an off year. On the other hand, we had a very polarizing new president get elected 2 years ago. So it's of concern, but we think hardworking Republicans will do okay, we hope. Does everybody hope that? We'll give you more quotes later on.
All right. Do you want to stay around and say hi to everyone individually?
Sure, we'll hang around here for 10 minutes and then I'm going to interview with Larry afterwards. So maybe talk to Gary as well later. Okay, thank you for being here. Was it okay?
Yes.
Give us any suggestions for doing it different next time.
This one tonight, you think?
Seems like he has a cold. How are you, Evelyn? I am. Thank you for your service. I saw you.